The Scottish poet Burns wrote an ode to a mouse, and in that I'll try to repeat in modern English, American English, pretty close to a translation. And it just says, there's a line in there in particular that says, sometimes the best laid plans of mice and men often go astray. And they do. Now that we've got the intro out of the way, I have to start with the very first video segment. Is just informational. Buying mowing grab bars, there's a difference in some of the part numbers that are available and not available. Some, when I looked on Amazon, were available in certain lengths, and some of them were near the same, and maybe the picture didn't quite match up. So I had to do a little deep dive and talk to Moen on their part numbers to see what they meant. So what we've done here is I've got this video, and it will explain a big thing right off the bat if you're curious on what the part number may mean.
I don't like doing vertical video too much, but I do want to show you this because I had to call on it, 'cause I'm not a grab bar expert. See up at the top, the numbers are the same, like that one that says R87. Well, that's the series, R87. 24 is the number of inches. D3 means it has the dimples as opposed to D2 that doesn't have the dimples. GBN, grab bar, nickel. Now this one over here, same part number, but you'll notice if I get the camera to focus, there is no L. So the difference strictly is, I had to call to confirm this because it was driving me nuts, the packaging. If you get a box, that little box kind of retail-ish looking thing, it's an L. If you get one that's in a bag like that, kind of contractor, plumbing supply house, it's not.
If you like this content, please go to calldeltosell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you. Thank you. Well, let's go look at the various plans as they developed over the progression of this project.
Well, we're going to mount a grab bar inside. First idea was to take this off and put it on the other side, because this is just a stud end wall, and there'll be a stud for people who don't know it. Even if you do videos, there's a stud going to be on the end cap, and then there'll be two more that'll be horizontal laid flat here with a little gap in between. That's a standard end wall way we frame those. So this ought to be solid wool, and I happen to know when I put that in there it was in fact. So I could put it on the outside, but it makes me have to reach over this edge, or anybody else, whoever comes in after me will have to reach over that edge. So I think it will be better to put it inside. Now, one of the benefits of going with Moen for this particular grab bar is, if I feel this, I can feel the flex in the fiberglass surround till I get right about here, and then it feels very solid. And it may be that I have wider blocking in this than I might know. I didn't put, well, we built a house, but I don't remember what the surround was like back in those days. So I'm going to try to put it, top one right here, and drop the other one down, let it fall where it may. 24-inch grab bar. If in fact there's no wood here, I might have a mess and have to go get the anchors that come with it. I believe they're called Secure Mount. They're Moen. They're made, it's a glorified single toggle that they use. They work well, you can do it. The thing is, up above it, there's a stud right there. And when I take a stud finder, I can take it across here, and of course it does read through the gap, through this airspace in between. You just can't rely on it. But you can tell kind of if there's something back. You can use it kind of look to sense for wires or something goofy like that. But it comes across here and it thinks there's something solid right there at that edge. So I'm going to go ahead and try that. Hopefully I've got wood there that's built into the surround itself. This wouldn't be a stud. This would be built into the surround itself for a grab bar or something like that. This thing is made over there. I'd flash it over there, but I gotta clean. I gotta clean the wall a little bit where the body wash and shampoo set. But it's already got a bar in the middle down there at the bottom. So maybe it does have a piece of wood here. We're gonna find out.
Well, we're getting ready to be committed, because when you drill a hole, that hole's going to be there. So here the thing is, recapping, in the first little segment we saw plan A would be to put it out on the stud outside of the shower, which is okay for an entry grab bar to get in and out, but it will provide no work whatsoever, no value whatsoever inside when you're actually showering. Nothing to steady or whatever. And inside is where it gets wet and slippery, right? So inside is better. So plan B then would be to screw it directly to the wood in the shower itself that we think we have there. The stud finder thinks it saw some wood there. We just don't know what's behind that fiberglass until we poke a hole. And we can, of course, have plan C, which would be to fall into using the Moen secure mount, which are rated and independently tested to work for grab bars on fiberglass. Well, I drilled a very small hole, just big as this wire to go through, and I went to feel in the back to check my depth. And unfortunately, I don't have 3.5 inches. There is a stud on the other side, not against the fiberglass, but against the back wall where the little closet is. And the problem is I've got a stud on the inside of that 3.5 space. I don't know why it's there, so it's going to take some effort to get this secure mount in there. Well, wasn't that a surprise? Our stud finder did in fact find a stud back there, but it wasn't, the wood it was detecting was not close to the fiberglass surround. In fact, it was back at 2 inches as we probed with our very small little wire, and we then opened it up to get a little bit to the hole saw drill size, I think it's 1/4, so that we could get a little bit of angle in there and feel what we could feel around the back of it, and we found something vertical back there we assumed was a stud. So now is the time to drill a big hole and really be committed to this here project. Because after all, plan C was to use the Moen anchors. The only thing we'd have to do is modify them a little bit. The way the Moen secure mounts work, they are actually designed for a full 3.5 inches of space to get to top, to put the little bracket on first with a little ring, and then you push the toggle in and straighten and pull it back to you. That works, but you need 3.5 inches. You can actually get it in 2-inch space, but the little plastic holder with a ring on it that tells you what, to point up or in the direction that you want to point it, that won't fit in 2 inches. You'll have to clip the back off. But I believe after this video, I believe I can work something out. Let's see how it turned out. If I hold the light, you can see it's back there, right here. And unfortunately, it's a little close. I don't have the full 2.5 inches. And as I felt with the wire, it goes across for a while. So I think I can fish it in there, but I'm going to have to trim a little bit off the plastic holder right there. Okay, so now we're up to plan D, which is to use the toggle, but we can't put the insert ring in first and then push the toggle in and pull it forward the way Moen had designed, because there's not 3.5 inches in the wall. So after we try that, we may end up leading to plan E, as in Edward. So what do you do when things don't go according to plan? Well, I like to have a backup plan just in case the first plan doesn't work. In this case, we're on the backup to the backup. This is a Moen secure mount. The toggle portion is nothing but a big piece of molded plastic. I'm sure it's quite strong. It's passed many third-party tests, and there's videos online about that. But it takes 3.5 inches, the full stud width inside, to get this thing to install. So after drilling that hole, now remember, if we started this project, we actually used the stud finder to go in there and search for wood. And it appeared by pushing and touching that we actually had wood right in that area, as if perhaps the makers of the fiberglass surround actually took and had more wood in there than it appeared, than we might see, because they're made to go with glass shower doors. So
when we probed it with that small wire, we found we only had 2 inches, which this, without modification, won't fit. Now the black piece, the little ring, is there only for orientation and to keep the black toggle from falling down if you take the screw out. We only had 2 inches. That thin wire proved that we only had 2 inches, but a little bit of a test figure I worked up proved that I could actually get the toggle in first, and then if I clipped the ends so that they were 2 inches long, the retainer was 2 inches long, I could then snug it up and it would stay snug against that little ring in the hole. It just took me an effort to run a string around and tie it so it wouldn't slide off the string. Surveyor string is what I used, and it worked and I could get it, but we ran into a problem after we drilled the 1.25 inch hole. Let me show you what that is. Now, as we've already seen that hole, we know that we have 2 studs back here, double studs in that hole. So I've got a good, solid structural mount to mount to. The question is, because this does flex a little bit, I don't want to end up with a gap that lets water get back there or the bar to wobble. So this is what we came up with. We sort of modified the idea for a solid mount. And so we have a spacer here cut to exactly the right length. And like the solid mount, we have a lag bolt. But in this case, instead of the solid mount, has nothing but a little thin piece of plastic that screws on that little spacer that you set up for your particular case. And in this case, this is a stainless bolt. Had to go buy about $2 to make up for the lag bolt, but it's 4 inches long. This piece is exactly 2 inches long, the spacer I made, and instead of having that plastic flange, we're just going to mount the Moen flange with this lag bolt through the whole assembly into one of those studs in the back. And of course, we pre-drilled with our little long drill bit. Now, I'm sure everybody has one of these laying in the garage like I did. It's an old drill bit, but it works well, and it's the proper size for this lag bolt, which is stainless. So we're going to put it together, and we're going to see how it works. And if we have to, we'll add a toggle on the hollow wall side. But when we looked over here, we discovered that while the sensor was picking up the studs on the other side of the wall, right inside of the wall, right in about here, whoop, here I am, got my dirty finger, right up in about here is the edge where the fiberglass laps over where they put that piece of plywood to mount the type of shower assembly to it. So we're going to try it. We're going to see how strong it is, and we only have to support 250 pounds, and I weigh a little bit more. Well, not a little bit more. Well, I weigh in the neighborhood of 250 pounds, but I think it'll be secure enough, and if necessary, I'll add a toggle in here to actually hold that down even stronger. I just, and the fiberglass is smooth and thin and uniform thickness pretty well, much right in through here. I could probably get that. May have a little trouble getting the 1/4 or the 3/16 started, but I have choices.
So at this point, I have pre-drilled using that long drill bit into the studs to make sure that I haven't split them and I get center where I want the big stainless steel lag bolt to go. I've made up 2 spacers. They're 2 plastic spacers made out of common materials, but they're there just to hold that plate flat up against the stud. So if the stud is compressing the spacers to keep that from bowing in the shower stall, and it's held up there pretty tight. Then I'll show you as I progress through there some additional things.
Now I have the plate mounted, and without having the bar attached to it, I can't really tell for sure, but this feels very secure. And after I get the bar in, I can actually run an extra screw in through this plate into the wood that's right up at that edge right there. Because the problem was that toggle hitting that plastic over here, the fiberglass, it wouldn't lay flat. So, this is a engineered solution, but it duplicates existing technology already in place and available. It's just better because this is stainless steel. And again, it's the same concept, has already been tested and marketed. I just had to make my own little spacer and buy the lag bolt, the 4-inch lag bolt. Now at this stage, all I've done is I mounted the top loosely. It's snug, but it's still loose, so it moved a little bit. And then I've gone down to the bottom to then use a level to mark the position of the lower flange, because I think I'm going to duplicate
this the same way as I did up top, because when I put this up here, it actually feels really tight, much tighter than I would expect for a fiberglass surround. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to just drill out that hole and add another spacer, find that stud, and use it again. Now I drilled the hole, and this is the size of wire that I used to probe how deep I could go in. And when I take my finger out and measure it, you see I don't have the 3.5 inches, which wasn't the problem. I could work around that, but the problem is that there's the edge of the plywood that we use to screw into these type things into comes to right about here, and I just can't get that toggle to lay flat. So we're just going to duplicate the same thing. Now, can you see what I was talking about? The edge of that piece of plywood just happened to come in and down, and you can see where it's been put in here. Now the top of the shell is actually thicker than down at the bottom. Now the mowing says it's good for, I think, 1/8 to 1/4, and it certainly can do that. But if we look through that hole, you can see we caught it. But that's okay, because if I need to, if I just want to be extra paranoid, I can run an extra screw right through that into that wood, and that should actually give it a little bit more help. And I could, if I thought it was necessary, come over here and add a toggle. I just think I'll just may just leave the toggle out. We'll just have to see how it feels. Well, that's pretty well much how I mounted that grab bar, having all those other things go wrong that just didn't play out. Of course, we used our electronic gizmos, our stud finders, to find out if there was something there. We also felt on the fiberglass to see if it got stiff, and in fact it did. We just did not know where the edge of that wood happened to lay, and it caught us in a pretty bad location because it was half on. If we had gone a little bit more, we could have got 2 screws on top and bottom in that wood, or we could have gone a little bit further inbound, and we would have missed it all together, but the secure mount toggle would not lay flat, so that wouldn't work. We do have the depth to the stud, and it is sturdy in that stud, pre-drilled, so that we don't split the stud. And then we came back and added 2 more screws, top and bottom, for a total of 4 extra screws that were used to go directly into the pre-drilled fiberglass. That would be the ones on the right, and the other went through the fiberglass into the wood, the extra little wood right there on top of the spacer. Now, I know somebody might want to ask, well, how did you make that spacer? And I don't want to tell you, because you can't, I'm not responsible for anything you may or may not do. But the lower spacer is made a little bit different when I ran out of kind of grab around the house type stuff. So it started with a piece of conduit. That's what I had. It's about the right diameter to go through an 1.25 inch hole and allow a little bit of a play. So then I had to find something to stiffen it even further, and to help keep, by narrowing the diameter inside the spacer, it was to keep that spacer center on the metal plate, the secure mount plate with the stainless steel screws that go into it. Just needed something to hang it. So I took a piece of flow gold, 3/4 inch, which is actually too big to go in that piece of pipe, so don't do this. Don't do this at all. But then I took it and put it in a saw, in my miter saw, and cut a slot right in the top, and then felt it to see if it was going to be about the right diameter, that if I heated it with, say, a heat gun or a heat shrink tubing gun, a paint removal gun, that I could soften it enough to make it go into that pipe and not have a gap or not have much of one. Once I accomplished that, it just happens that a piece of 1/2 inch CPVC pipe, you can put a little plumber's glue on it and slide it right in, and it glues to make a solid mount. Then, just to make sure it stayed in the center, I do have a piece of 1/2 inch poly that I slide over. It doesn't give any strength. It's just to kind of keep this from falling up and down too much when it has that lag bolt going through it. So if you want to look at whether or not you think this is a solid enough mount, that's how tightly it fits together. When I did what I did. And of course I painted it just so it'd look a little bit more professional, but really all it's doing, coming back with that saw and making a nice square cut, that goes against the stud. That 4-inch lag bolt goes through that spacer into the hole, and of course it holds that metal plate up. And I'll show you a picture of that top mount with those 4 or the 2 extra screws in it. So we're holding it 3 places in 2 different places for a total of 6 places, and it is solid. But don't try this at home, because it's not been independently lab tested, and I haven't done any shear analysis on that bolt. But then again, we're holding it with those 2 screws on each, 2 stainless screws on either side, and it's just a matter of keeping it all nice and tight and water resistant.